Hello and welcome to the Southeast Asian Conference on Education 2025. Today, IAFOR is here for the first time ever in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. And having with me today is Professor Stefanie Shamila Pillai. Professor, would you introduce yourself for us, please?
Thank you so much, and selamat datang ke Kuala Lumpur. So I'm Stefanie, and I'm a senior professor at the Faculty of Languages and Linguistics, Universiti Malaya, here in Kuala Lumpur.
And you gave a presentation titled Rethinking Language Education, Lessons from Malaysia. And first question I would like to ask is about balancing different languages. Malaysia's education system includes a mix of Malay, English, Mandarin, and Tamil. How do you think policymakers can balance the need for global communication through languages like English, but still with the preservation of Malaysia's rich linguistic heritage, including indigenous or, in your presentation, heritage languages? Is it possible to achieve both without one overshadowing the other?
Yeah, it's a really great question, and I think the simple answer would be it's a very difficult balancing act. But I think Malaysia has done well in the sense that while our national language is Malay, and that is something that we will preserve and we will prioritize, we also focus on English in the education system because we realize that we need English for a lot of things, including for communication in the business world in Malaysia. But because we also realize that we have a huge Chinese population, and we also have Indians, mainly of South Indian origin, Tamil speakers. So we've always maintained and kept the Tamil medium and Mandarin medium or Chinese medium schools as well at the primary level. So in that sense that we've tried to balance that. Now in terms of heritage languages or indigenous languages, that is a little bit more complicated because the communities can be quite small. However, I think we've had great success with implementing 3 indigenous languages, 2 in the Sabah and Sarawak, Kadazan Dusun and Iban, and also Semai, which is an indigenous language in Peninsular Malaysia, in schools where there are a lot of I guess you could say there are a majority of children from Semai-speaking homes. So I know that there are efforts at the ministry's level to try and look at how we can include more of these indigenous languages. The challenge is often about resources, training teachers. So we have to just not look at introducing the subjects, but whether we can have everything in place. Yeah, from teacher education right down to the curriculum, and how do we deal with languages that are mainly spoken rather than written. So, but we're doing something about it, and I think that's a great model for other countries as well. Yeah.
Let's talk about English and colonial legacy.
Yes.
So you mentioned that the prominence of English in education may stem from colonial legacies or global trends. How has Malaysia's history shaped its current language policies? And do you see a way for post-colonial societies to decolonize their language education systems while still preparing students for a globalized world?
Right. I mean, English, you could say, is an accident of history, right? I mean, it could have been French, it could have been Spanish, but it's English.
Right.
And so because of education, because English was so embedded in education from the from the 19th century, that legacy has stayed on, right? So because the other common language that we use apart from Malay is English, so that still is kind of pervasive in the private sector especially, and now with private education as well. International schools, private higher education is a big thing because we are an education hub in Asia. So therefore, I mean, we can't get rid of it, and I don't think we should. But it is another language that we learn in schools. But we know that in reality, having English proficiency, fluency will open more doors for you than if you don't. That's the reality, whether you like it or not. How do we tackle it? We know that not every child in Malaysia is coming from an English-speaking background. So that's why we need to make sure that everybody has an equal chance of learning English. But at the same time, we also have our colloquial Malaysian English, which we use as a local lingua franca, if you like. Not for everyone, but many people in the urban cities especially use it. And we cannot say that this is the same as the standard English that we learn in schools. Okay, and you talk about legacy. The standard English cannot just look at native varieties anymore. We can't say, oh, we have to use a British standard or an American standard. We have to forge our own standard, because obviously the way we pronounce things is different, right? But in terms of standard English, you can look at the vocabulary, the grammar, and we have to acknowledge the fact that our variety of English is not the same as a native variety. And I'm talking about the school English, right? It's still standard, but it's not the same. So how are we tackling it? Well, we've had a roadmap for English language education because, as I said, we're trying to make sure that every child has an equal opportunity at learning a certain standard of English by a certain time frame of their education. So that's coming to an end this year. So we'll see how we're going to review that, how the success of that roadmap, and whether we need to make new policies or take more actions in order to make sure that all Malaysian children have an opportunity to learn English, and then to learn it at a particular level, at a minimum level that's stated in the policies. Yeah.
And then we have different groups of people, and I would like to talk about language and identity. Yes. So in a country as linguistically diverse as Malaysia, how do language choices in education impact cultural identity? For example, does prioritizing certain languages in school risk marginalizing communities whose mother tongues are excluded from the curriculum?
Thank you. I think that's a very pertinent question. I don't think it marginalizes communities per se. It marginalizes the language in the sense that when you go to school, so let's say you speak language A at home, and then you come to school and you have to learn everything in Malay, and then you learn English as a subject. But your own language is not taught in school, right? So that doesn't mean that we're marginalizing you as a person of that community. Now the question is, what about your language? Okay, so we would expect that, you're learning your language at home in your community, but unfortunately with a lot of our communities there's been a switch to a majority language. So for example, with Chinese communities, the switch to Mandarin. With some Indian communities, the switch has already been like maybe third generation, a switch to English. The switch has been to English. So I think if the family still keeps the language, there is a chance that you will use it at home and you still be able to speak your Hokkien, your Hakka, your Malay dialect, your Kristang. But if you stop using it, if the families themselves have, whether it's a formal or informal policy, the families decide that, let's all speak Mandarin because no use learning. You yourself are marginalizing your language. So it's not coming from the system per se. The families and the community, they are the ones that are sort of putting their own language at the back burner. They probably do it unconsciously, right? Because they think, we must make sure our children can speak good English, so we better speak English at home or Mandarin at home. But by doing so, they are losing sight of their own language. Yeah.
Continuing, I'd like to discuss about equity and education. So you raised the issue of equitable access. Yes. To education in multilingual context. How can Malaysia's education system ensure that students from different linguistic backgrounds have equal opportunities to succeed, especially when the medium of instruction might not be their first language?
I think we've got some really nice examples from schools where really sometimes it's the school head, the teachers themselves who realize that the majority of their children, for example, come from a particular indigenous group and they speak that language at home. And the teachers actually make an effort to learn the language and use the language in the school. Meaning, if you have a word, library, or perpustakaan, they also try to see, is there another word for, and they put it there, so there's kind of a seamless transition, if you like. When the children come to school, it's not like, I cannot use my language, it's illegal, it's not the language for school, it's not good enough for school, but they see it in school, they see it in maybe the books that they read, their stories, so there are good examples. I wish that these examples would be taken up at a higher national level or more widespread, but of course each state, each community, each school community is very different, right? So it kind of need to train teachers perhaps to be aware, to be sensitive, and to come up with how can we include the linguistic resources of the children in our teaching, their culture in their teaching. I think the plenary today was fantastic, and it gave me a lot of ideas of how to create cultural awareness. Although they were talking about AI, I think AI does have a role to play, so I love the plenary, and I think it resonates with what we're talking about.
Last but not least, lessons for the world. Malaysia's experience with multilingualism and language policy is, to me, very interesting and unique. But what lessons can other linguistically diverse countries learn from its successes and challenges? Are there any specific strategies or policies from Malaysia that could be adapted elsewhere?
I think the fact that we allow at the primary school level, we allow for the medium of instruction to be in Mandarin and Tamil is kind of, it says that we are open to other languages, right? And also our constitution says that we can teach any other language of our communities. There's no restriction basically. So because I know in some countries there might be restrictions. So that is a good thing about us, is that there are no restrictions except for, of course, formal use, public use, where we use the national language, right? So the problem is about resources. So in the 3 indigenous languages that I showcased, or I gave examples of, Kadazan Dusun, Iban and Semai, they're really good examples of how the whole process was thought about, from teacher training right down to what happens in the classroom, right? So now the challenge is to go for other languages as well. So it's not easy because you need resources, and I think you need community engagement, which means that sometimes you can't do everything in school. So how do you then take it to the community or empower communities to do so? So I think that's the lesson that we need to learn, and from other countries as well, how they engage communities in heritage language education and maintenance. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Professor.
Thank you.